In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers, that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Meeting details and the draft agenda were also posted on our Township website. Please all stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Prupus?
Here.
Ms. Romano? Here. Mr. Banayak?
Here.
Mayor Miggins?
Here. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve the September 20th, 2022 Township Committee minutes?
Still moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. May I have a motion to approve the October 3rd, 2022 Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Reports. Mr. Vinayak, do you have any reports for us this evening?
No reports.
No reports. Ms. Prupus, do you have any reports for us this evening?
Yes, the two-way traffic subcommittee met and went over the report that we all received back in December.
Mhm.
And there are questions about the report from the committee that then Alex sent back to Maurice from Collars. So I am assuming that they will get back to us answering the questions. The subcommittee will meet again to go over the responses of the questions. It looks like there's support from the subcommittee to keep moving this forward, but there are questions. So if that all goes well, then I guess at some point, Maurice and Michelle from Collars will come and present it to the public.
This is the Essex Street.
This is Essex Street, and also they're gonna look at Spring Street as well, which I remember us having a conversation on the dais last fall about, and they didn't look at Spring Street yet, so they're gonna look at Spring Street now, and
Do it both at the same time.
well, in the report that they present, they'll have information about Spring
Awesome.
as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other reports?
No other reports.
Mr. Cohen, do you have any reports?
I do. The Cultural Engagement, Diversity and Arts Committee, the Senior Committee, met this morning. Starting to put the plans together for Founding Day, which will be April 22nd, with April 23rd as a rain date. As with last year, there'll be the 19th century band, historical society walking tours, a community cleanup, public art show, a kids art event at the Bauer Center, and there'll be an unveiling of a new mural in downtown. In addition, we're planning to have Cedar Sundays 4 times in the year, focusing on different groups within the town, looking toward participation from the Chinese American Association, the Indian American Association, looking at food and music themes, multicultural music, and the arts. Those days are scheduled for May 21st, June 11th, July 23rd, and October 1st, and they'll be all over town, not just in Taylor Park.
Great. Thank you so much. Ms. Romano, do you have any reports?
No reports, Mayor.
No reports. Mr. McDonald?
Yes, just one brief report. As the committee had indicated, when we were looking to do Lot 14 improvements, we were to set up a meeting with those businesses that would be impacted by those improvements. We sent an email to those businesses with the conceptual plan for the parking lot, setting up a meeting in the morning of January 24th. For those businesses that can make it, and certainly we welcome them to come and discuss it with us. But also if they are unable to make it, we just ask that they write their questions, their concerns to us. We don't want to get into a situation where we're having multiple individual meetings with businesses or persons over there. That's why we set up the meeting. We just want to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. And just a brief update on the commercial garbage. As I had indicated at the end of last year, we are taking some additional time with that. We sent out a letter to the businesses that are being impacted We've also set up a listening session to meet with those businesses that are being impacted. So we're delaying that transition in the commercial privatization for commercial businesses to get their own private garbage a little while. And I'll continue to communicate with the committee and the public as that continues.
Awesome. As far as the meeting for Lot 14 on the 24th, what time and where is that being held?
9 a.m. in Town Hall.
9 a.m. at Town Hall. Terrific. Thank you. Mr. Marizzi, do you have anything for us?
I do not have a special report.
Okay. I have just two things. I met with the rec department, and they're just reminding everybody that for the skating in the park, we need 5 days of sub-freezing cold in order for the pond to freeze over. And we've had some issues where there's residents or children showing up and going onto the pond, and that can be very dangerous for themselves, in addition to any of our firemen or police that would ever have to rescue them. So we're asking that everyone be diligent. There is a big red flag. If the red flag's out, please heed, do not go there. And when the green flag's up, then you can definitely go skating. But we do need 5 days of sub-freezing. And also, we're getting so many complaints, numerous complaints of people speeding and passing. And, somebody's not driving fast enough for someone, so they're passing them, which is illegal. So we are setting up police cars to start ticketing. We hate to do it, but we have to do it because we don't want anyone to get hurt. So you will see, and you'll never know where they are. You'll see out and about town. There are, what are those things called? Where they're showing your speed limit. Right now, there happens to be one on Chatham Road, and there happens to be one on Highland Avenue. The stanchions.
Speed trailer.
Speed trailers. So they're out there, so you can see what you're doing in terms of speed. But the police are going to start ticketing anyone who's speeding. They have to just to slow it all down. We've had somebody call their dog got hit. It's a hot mess. So please slow down when you're driving and know that we're out there ticketing. That's all I have on that. So now I'd like to introduce Jared Cantor. As many of you know, Jared Cantor is the special counsel on affordable housing, and he is here to give a report tonight. Jared, take it away.
Good evening, Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, committee members. Thank
Good
you for having me tonight. For the record, Jared Cantor, Antonelli Cantor Rivera. So, Mayor, as you know, I was engaged by the Township of Milburn to continue your compliance to in your settlement agreement that was executed July 20th, 2021. There was an ask by a subcommittee to see if there was any room to try to renegotiate that settlement agreement. I was asked to go to Fair Share Housing Corporation to look at two separate paragraphs within that settlement agreement. The first paragraph is paragraph 12, which involves the 75-unit, 100% affordable on 11 Main Street, the DPW site. We approached Fair Share Housing with a proposal to see if there was any room. The response was not interested in renegotiating the DPW 11 Main Street site and urged the township to move forward with expeditiously. There were further discussions. Fair Share Housing is clear at this point that they were either going to live up to paragraph 12 in that settlement agreement, or they're going to enforce it. And they've gone one step further on paragraph 12. They filed a motion to enforce litigants' rights, and they're now seeking a monitor to come in to force the township to do those things in paragraph 12 related to those 75 units. What a monitor essentially would be somebody appointed by the court in addition to the special master, would be at the cost of the township, and they would come in and make sure those things are getting done. I'll get to it in a moment, I'm going a little out of order. We were before the court on January 13th. Based on that court appearance, I believe if the court were to hear that motion on those 75 units, the court would not look favorably on the Township of Milburn, given that we have this executed agreement. I was also asked to look at paragraph 9 of the settlement agreement, which deals with the various overlays, many of which have been adopted. I can tell you that there are ongoing discussions with Fair Share Housing on those overlays. So that's kind of where we stand there. As far as compliance, and I know Township.
Can I interrupt you
Yes.
1 second? I just want to be clear on this. So you were tasked to go to Fair Share Housing. You went to Fair Share Housing.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're the ones who said that they're not allowing, that they're going to enforce the 75 unit. Is that correct?
There was a conversation had with Fair Share Housing, our special master, a member of the subcommittee, myself, Alex, and there was, under no certain terms did they say that they're moving forward with the 75 unit, whether through court enforcement, they were not going to negotiate that term with the Township of Milburn.
And regardless, they're wanting a monitor?
No. So part of our discussion was, what can we do? And that actually dovetails well into the next part of my presentation. What can Milburn do to avoid having monitor, to avoid having court issue an order against the township? And what they want to see is more steps towards compliance. And I know several steps have been taken by this governing body, but there's several steps yet to be taken. We've worked in conjunction, obviously, with your municipal attorney, who's brought you up to speed on several things that have already been done. But specifically, and I think these are items that I know the township needs to do to get into compliance. The housing element and fair share plan was adopted by the planning board. It still needs to be adopted by this body. That essentially, it reduces the settlement agreement to your master plan. It becomes an element of your master plan. We also need to introduce and adopt the Canoe Brook overlay zoning ordinance. I know that was before this governing body last year. It was not introduced. That's part of the settlement agreement.
It was introduced but not adopted.
It was never
Right?
introduced,
No,
I
it
don't
was
think.
introduced
I'm sorry, Mayor.
The year before.
It was never-
Okay.
Um,
Sorry. Thank you.
We also need to adopt what's called the spending plan. That's a statutory requirement. And what the spending plan essentially, it details how the money is going to be used. That's in your fair share housing budget, developers fees. I think that resolution is prepared and compliance would require that resolution to be passed. We need to adopt a resolution of intent to fund any shortfalls, which essentially says if our spending plan doesn't fund entirely the plan, our element plan, that the township will step in. We need to adopt the rental and sale operating manual. Again, it's a statutory requirement. Those are requirements essentially when applications are filed for fair share housing, how rents are determined at a high level. We have to adopt the RPM developers agreement for the DPW site. I know there's been some negotiations with RPM. I wasn't involved, and so that's another. And then we have to adopt something called the rehab operating manual, and that deals with community grants, planning, and housing, and that's ongoing. So those are essentially, I think, the 7 steps required to continue with compliance. And again, Mayor, there are discussions, around paragraph 12, the overlay zones, and any potential changes there could impact the timeline. But I'll further advise this governing body that I was in court on January 13th, that's Friday. The court was emphatic that the judge wanted movement. It was the first time before this judge. She had taken over all the fair share housing matters in Essex County. She was well advised on the township's position. She reluctantly moved our compliance hearing out to February 28th. And the purpose of that was to see if we could take steps in the near future moving forward with our discussion with Fair Share Housing Corporation, perhaps further negotiations with RPM, to see if we can take further steps to compliance to avoid Fair Share Housing's motion to enforce and aid in litigants' rights and the monitor. So we have another meeting with the court on February 3rd to discuss progress. So I'll be reporting back to the court on February 3rd. And I'm happy, I think that's my full report, Mayor, but I'm happy obviously to take any questions from the board.
Mr. Benayak, do you have any questions for Mr. Cantor?
Yeah, sure. Earlier when we were talking about, when we shortlisted RPM, there was a brief discussion, I'm not sure if we ever voted on it or not, that RPM can come back with anything, how do we know that they are actually doing, or that is the best contract that we can get? At that time, it was, if that is not the contract we like it, then we can get another company involved in it. With this, everything seems so last minute. Would we even have time to get anyone else in?
So I will defer to your municipal attorney. I think he has handled a lot of those negotiations, but I believe there was an RFP process and there was some
Yes,
negotiating.
we went through RFP
But
process.
I'll defer to your municipal attorney because I think he's been handling those negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. In answer to your question, RPM was designated pursuant to a resolution of the Township Committee as the conditionally designated developer.
Right.
Subject to completing negotiations with the Township Committee on key elements of that negotiation are the definition of the project, and there's been community input into that. That will be in the document. And a negotiation of a schedule, negotiation of a period of time for them to do due diligence on the site, and many other typical provisions that go into an agreement, remedies, default, termination, and those sorts of things. So you will not have an agreement with them until there's another vote of the Township Committee after we fill in all those blanks.
But would we have time to involve any other company if we don't like their negotiation?
It sounds like we have barely enough time to
Right.
finish with RPM, from what I understand.
And just so, RPM also filed a correspondence with the court. They're seeking to be an interested party. We objected to them doing so by correspondence. They're likely moved to intervene. There are certain tax credits that are coming due. They're rolling on an annual basis. And they're taking the position that they're harmed unless the township moves with diligence. I don't know how successful they would be in that motion to intervene. I can tell you the court is aware of RPM. Fair Share Housing is aware of RPM. And I think the court was very sympathetic to RPM. And Fair Share Housing has repeatedly reiterated how important it is to get these tax credits and this money that's been set aside for affordable housing in the state this year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cannon.
Ms. Umana, do you have any questions?
You had mentioned a rental manual. Is that something that the developer has or something that?
So I got it from Beth McManus.
Oh, okay.
I do have a copy of it.
It is something that CGP&H, who is our housing liaison, is formulating, as well as the rehab manual as well. But these are elements of every settlement of every community, like where you choose a liaison, a housing liaison, and they develop these manuals on behalf of the township. But yeah, we will make sure that obviously all of this stuff is distributed.
So the rent would coincide with like surrounding towns?
Well, it's based on our region's numbers, and the average rent based on low, moderate, and very low income. And that is established each year, I believe.
Ms. Purvis, do you have any questions?
Do towns make the affordable housing fund public? Is that public information, how much money is in the fund?
Yeah, right. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of an audit for sure, and it's I think that if there was a question of the amount of funds that are in it, but I don't know whether the number is public, but it's no big deal to make that public.
Well, do you know if other towns, and specifically, do you know if other towns make that more accessible and more public?
I mean, I've heard,
Or is it just
I've
by
heard other
asking?
towns, but I mean, I think it's just by asking. I don't know if it's like a published number or on web. I wouldn't think it would be on websites. But again, I think, if your administrator would make that information available, I don't think there'd be an issue with that.
We just started last year on that.
Yeah.
Fund,
I
yeah.
can look into it.
I know, yeah. But I was just wondering how that gets put out.
Anything else?
No.
Mr. Cox? Mr. Marizzi?
I'm done.
Mr. Osama?
No, I think Mr. Kenner covered the compliance mechanisms. Which is what I was-
Are we gonna let the public ask questions to Mr. Cantor?
We didn't plan on it, no? We should, but we didn't.
We should.
I think we should allow the public to ask a few questions, maybe give them like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, something, to ask questions, Mr. Cantor.
I don't think Mr. Cantor's prepared for that. Were you prepared for that, Mr. Cantor?
You're not prepared for that. You wouldn't be prepared for anything.
No.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Will there be a time for the public to, because I know that they can't correspond directly, there's no, you can't send emails to Mr. Cantor. He's not gonna respond to any of the public, so I just wanna put that out there. But is there any other forum that they can ask questions about this process? I mean, I know we're gonna be going into redevelopment of there's a big process ahead of us. And because we're not Zooming, I think it would be appropriate for there to be maybe an information session where people could come and ask Mr. Cantor, and then he could prepare for it, like all their questions about what's gonna happen between now and shovel in the ground, or even the redevelopment plan. I mean, there's a lot of steps that are gonna take place that I think that we should allow our community to ask those questions of Mr. Cantor in some form, if not tonight.
Well, it won't be tonight, but that's a possibility that we could set up a session for the public to be able to speak with Mr. Cantor. I don't think that's a problem, but it won't be tonight.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you, and I'll make myself available and perhaps other professionals.
Okay,
Thank
yeah,
you.
maybe we could do it like we had done previously, where we had gone to the middle school. You were there, Mr. Maranzini. We could do the same type of forum. That'd be part of it.
All right,
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr. Cantor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Public comment. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, and speak loudly so that your comments may be understood by all and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or committee member reads verbatim from a prepared statement, please email a copy to the Township Clerk's office at townclerk@milburntwp.org. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 1 3-minute session. You will be prompted when there's 30 seconds remaining. Each individual will be given an opportunity to make their public comment, and please be patient, and we will address each member of the public that wishes to speak. This is a business meeting, and please do not address professionals or staff directly. A reminder, we are all neighbors, and personal attacks will not be tolerated. I will now open the public comment period.
Hi, Ben Stoller, 422 Wyoming. Good evening.
Good
Thank you
evening.
for providing a comment period. The looming question I continue to have and has yet to really be answered is why does it make sense for a single site income segregated project that exceeds our town's 100% RDP obligation, which we've already met, for the required units available? I'm not sure what world that actually makes sense to continue to build when we've already met that obligation. There is a lot of misinformation. If I have it wrong, I'd love to hear back why it's wrong. I'm an analyst by trade, growing up in the city. My back of the envelope calculation, basically if I look at the land that we're selling for $1, that's worth $20+ million on appraised value for the dump. Remediation our town will bear at $5 to $10 million. Student population growth on 75 units, assume 1.5 kids a unit. That's nearly $2 million. Cost to relocate the dump, $5 to $8 million. Additional costs for municipal functions like fire, police, traffic patterns, flood mitigation, as we're doing now, all with zero tax receipts. After our last town meeting, I was talking to a few of the town council, and they mentioned that I'm missing a big part, which is called the pilot payments. Okay, what's the pilot payment? Where are we getting it? I did a little digging. Pilot payments are intended to attract developers to projects that would otherwise not be considered dilapidated, depressed, unattractive, risky locations. Last time I checked, Milburn's none of that. Milburn's fairly prime real estate. So, it must be recognized that pilot money is not free. It is a payment in lieu of conventional taxes from the developer. So if we did have another developer there that bought the land for market value, that invested their own money, they would pay us market rate taxes in perpetuity. That doesn't happen under a pilot program. Under a pilot program, you get paid as a percentage, no one's told us what percentage it is, of the developer's revenue. And it can end at any time if that developer says their revenue is going down, increased cost, et cetera, et cetera. When we look at that, and we look at that reduction in revenue to Milburn compared to the pilot payments that we're going to receive, it makes zero sense. It's incomprehensible how over a 30-year period, if you even look at 30 years, it can go anywhere from $50 to $75 million deficit for the town. Who's looked at those numbers? Has Alex looked at those numbers? Have you guys? Where is it? As I move on, I looked at your website, Mr. Cantor, and it said you're a zealous advocate for your clients. Well, I want to know who your clients are. Is it the town board or is it the citizens who pay the taxes? That's why it'd be nice to have an open forum to ask questions and such. It didn't seem like you were very zealous with the judge when you're saying that we're taking everything, you're giving it to us, and please don't send a monitor and monitor us. You have to fight back. I have plenty of lawyers. You have to push back. Mr. Marizzetti will tell you. He's been doing this for a long time. In terms of looking at, yep.
I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you. I know it's a thankless job. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. Again, the theme right here tonight is transparency, robust informed civic participation, accountability, and the rule of law. I want to start first focusing on the agenda packet on the bill list. This is a repetitive question. Why haven't we received an accounting of all post-August 1st, 2021 cost of implementing or complying with the Fair Share Housing Agreement? We've been promised in October 2021 that we would have S&W, because as part of the administrative code, this body has to approve the payments, ratify the payments that are made to the city employees. That has not occurred for years. Also, interesting, on the bill list, it talks about a PATFA 2 fund expenditure, but there's no backup. And that takes me back to the last meeting. I had questions about retention resolutions. Interesting, on the agenda, you're ratifying 3 of the appointments of various boards that you did at the last meeting. Why? At the last meeting, I started mentioning about the local assistance board. And there's a temporal question I asked about, when does someone become an employee of the city or the township? When you take an oath of office, you become an employee. And I read back, and I ask you to go back and revisit that question. When you also look at your audits, Schedule E, shows no money is being received for that fund, but we know that there became contributions. I think our audits might have to be restated. I'm a person that forced other municipalities to reissue their financial statements and audits. The virtual civic participation. After the last meeting, we all watched TV and we watched Congress. We saw how the Speaker of the House had to give up, make deals to become Speaker of the House. We also learned that before they could operate, they had to adopt rules for the Congress to operate. This body has not adopted any rules for this new reconstituted body. How are you operating? As I told you last year, resolutions is a temporal limit. I don't know how you're doing this. I don't know what power our mayor did to unilaterally change our rules. Retaining professionals, I ask you a question. Who makes the distinction between an open and fair process and a non-open and fair process? Who made that determination? No one can give me an answer. And I thank our city clerk, who needs a shout out. She's a rock star. Because you look at the notice that's been posted. She told you how you did and the amounts that are paid. But I think we need to know how made the determination not to go out for RFQs. As to your bond ordinance, I've been looking for the supplemental debt statement because we're in a gap period. But before you adopt a bond, you have to issue a supplemental debt statement. It's not on the website. It's not attached. Oprah.
Mr. Feld, thank you. Thank you.
You have no rules right now in place. I think I can still talk. There's no 3-minute limitation.
Thank you, Mr. Feld.
That is so true.
Hi, I'm Frank Sacamandi, and I live on Lee Terrace. I would first like to start with a few questions that I would appreciate each and every township committee member to answer. First, do you believe transparency and accountability is an important facet of a democratically elected government? Furthermore, do you believe that free speech is a fundamental democratic principle? Do you believe that residents have the right to have their voices heard by elected officials? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then I cannot understand why you would go along with Mayor Miggins' recent unilateral decision to eliminate the Zoom option for participating in township committee meetings. The Zoom option was a crucial mechanism for allowing robust civic participation for residents. Many residents have work, health, and or family obligations that prevent them from attending township committee meetings in person. But the Zoom option gave residents an easy way to exercise their right to be heard. Taking this option away reduces transparency and seems like a deliberate attempt to suppress residents' voices. Suppression of residents' rights to be heard is wrong, and you should all take steps tonight to ensure that the Zoom option is restored. Now onto the subject of fair share housing. It sounds like this TC is going to barrel ahead with the existing settlement agreement. And if that's the case, then I think the township owes the residents answers to the following questions. 1, when is the township going to let the public know where they plan to relocate the affected portions of the DPW site? 2, when is the township going to let residents know the cost of moving the DPW site? 3, how does the township intend to pay for the cost of relocating the DPW site? 4, is the township planning on using a pilot program with RPM for the development of the income segregated housing on the DPW site? If so, have you calculated the impact this will have on our school budgets, since we will have new students with no commensurate property tax revenue from that development? 5th, when will the township complete all of the required environmental testing for the DPW site? And 6th, which of the town's hired professionals will be handling the developer's agreement with RPM? I ask because it is my understanding that Attorney Mariziti used to do work for RPM, and I would hope that he would recuse himself from any work on the developer's agreement with RPM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Selectman.
Renee Paparian, 64 Mountain View Road. South Mountain is a walker's dream. Residents walk their children to school, walk to Taylor Park and into town to eat and shop, walk their dogs. Plenty of people jog and run. But traffic in and through South Mountain is dangerous. And you have brought this subject up tonight. Fabulous. This is by no means a new issue, and it's a growing one, and it's well known to the township administration and police. And unfortunately, if you live in South Mountain, it is all too common to hear, I was almost hit by a car again. Oh my God, look how fast those cars are going. Or does anyone ever stop at a stop sign? I realize, as do you, that speeding and careless driving are issues of concern throughout the town. And I'm very glad the police are going to begin to give out tickets. But South Mountain has the distinction of being a well-known, well-traversed shortcut between Milburn Avenue and Main Street. This issue has existed for years. It continues to get worse. And when construction begins on the former Annie Says site, the shortcut traffic will increase exponentially. Waiting to address speeding, failure to give pedestrians the right of way, failure to stop at stop signs, and failure to use turn signals should not be an option. And I mean specifically in South Mountain. Action can readily and must be taken. Rather than being a matter for the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Board, the implementation of a prolonged ticket blitz, not held during school vacations, can change the behavior of drivers in the area. The goal would be to gain voluntary compliance of traffic laws, thereby increasing traffic safety. Increased enforcement must be visible to the motoring public. Drivers need to see officers issuing tickets. Tickets issued could offset the cost of temporarily increasing police presence in the sector of South Mountain. South Mountain is a special case here, and it needs to be considered as such. Now, about the recall. There are residents signing the petitions to recall Margaret Miggins and Sanjeev Vinayak who are afraid of retaliation against them and their families, including their children. Now, I am not accusing you or Deputy Mayor Vinayak of making any threats or directly causing fear or reprisals, and I do not know what or from whom these people are hearing information to cause them concern. I find their fears incredibly upsetting. What I do know is that residents who are registered to vote in town have every right under state law to sign petitions to recall elected officials of our municipality. Mayor Miggins and Deputy Mayor Vinayak, will you please give your personal assurances tonight that there will be no retribution nor any acts of retaliation taken by you, nor anyone acting on your behalf, nor will you condone any such actions or behavior against any signer of the petitions, nor any members of their family.
Thank you. Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
My pleasure.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome our two new members, and thank you very much for letting me speak. Dennis Fabian, 1 Barbary Lane, Short Hills. First of all, I've only come up here to speak about the contaminated dump site. I think it's a big problem. I think it's a Pandora's box waiting to open, if not now, within the next 5 to 10 years. Other communities have suffered similar types of problems and have had to pay the price for shutting down big projects like this that have been built on contaminated sites. As a physician, I looked at the environmental report. There are contaminants, substantial contaminants, cobalt and other polycarbons and hydrocarbons on that site. There is no doubt about it. And the environmental studies have not really been completed because some of the areas were not even tested. So that's my point about being up here. And it seems to have been falling on deaf ears. Nobody listens. Number 2, I thank Mr. Cantor for coming, but I want him to know about the Canoe Brook site. That site is on a watershed area. And until that's negotiated, that cannot be negotiated until the Environmental Protection Agency comes in to say that it's okay to continue that as a site for fair share housing in the future. It's a big problem in that area. Number 3, I've had a problem the last several times I've come to speak. Who is the Township Committee? Why is the Township Attorney and the Business Administrator sitting with the Township Committee on the dais? What rules allows them to sit there for the Township Committee? They're permitted to answer questions and give their reports, but they can give it off the dais. I want to know what rules are considered that they should be there. Because having the Township Attorney sitting on the dais provides some sort of a bullying tactic for the public that it's very difficult to discern sometimes what position they're taking. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Glenn Paparian, 64 Mountain View Road, Milburn. Just want to echo Renee's comments regarding the traffic conditions in South Mountain, particularly Mountain View Road, Southern Slope, and Ridgewood. It's treacherous. You try to walk a dog, you're risking your life. Something has to be done. Really appreciate you bringing it up, Mayor Biggins. Regarding the affordable housing, I want to point council to section 12E of the agreement. I have read the agreement. And 12E talks about the feasibility of the dump site, and it makes reference that if it's not feasible, we are to immediately try other sites. I think based on Dr. Fabian's comments, and Jerry has made many comments previously before this committee, that it's not a safe site. There's issues regarding remediation. When the remediation occurs, will there be airborne particles affecting the middle school kids? There's a lot of issues with respect to this we don't have to deal with. Milburn owns a lot of other property. The agreement also makes reference to eminent domain if necessary. We can find other spots that are safer for this 75 unit project. I'm not in favor of the 75 unit project. I would prefer a market share affordable housing project, but if we have to do it, if it is part of the agreement, I think we have to at least consider the opportunity. You're gonna have a closed session after this. Consider the opportunity for other locations where we might be able to put this site. Mr. Cantor had made reference to the zoning overlays, and I don't know specifically what's being negotiated. I know you're going to be meeting afterwards. I just want to point out that the B2 section of the settlement agreement references a section of Milburn, Lower Milburn, from Annie says to through where Trader Joe's is. It's the most highly unit density of all the different overlays. It's 40 units per acre. And compare that to the CMO district or the B4 district, it's purely unfair for the two neighborhoods of South Mountain and Wyoming. It's just unfair. It should be more equitably distributed. I don't think Fair Share will care as long as you agree to the same amount of units as where we put them, as long as we equitably distribute them. And my final question would be what's going on with Annie Says? I haven't heard anything about it. I know there's a sign out saying for lease, for short-term lease. I don't know if there's what the next steps are. There's been silence regarding it. What are the next steps and when are they going to happen? Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Dave Cosgrove, 99 Oakview. Two comments that I have. The first is I'd urge you folks to bring back the Zoom function. It's a real convenience for residents like myself. If you're not feeling well one night, you can watch it on TV. You can still participate and read a question or ask a question. I don't know why it's being taken away. It's just such a nice thing for the residents, and it's a good faith thing to show to the residents that this is something we want to do because we want to engage you folks. Second thing is Mr. Cantor, thank you. His comments about that right now you're negotiating, or that he's negotiating changes to the overlay zones. And I think we're doing that backwards because the residents who are going to be affected by the change in the overlay zone should know first that their neighborhood's in play. So it can be discussed, because what's going to happen, which happens far too often here, is that he's going to negotiate something that Fair Share thinks is acceptable to Fair Share, acceptable to us, and then we're going to have a public session where there's no chance, and there's no chance to change it. I don't know if my neighborhood is affected by this. I've heard comments about the 40 units per acre. I think Chatham Road, we're 42 units an acre there, by my math. So please, let's get if these overlays are being changed, or there's other little details that are being changed, let's get those out first so people can comment first about why they think that's a crummy idea or a better idea, or it's better to change it here or there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cosgrove.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Kung. I live at 17 Lee Terrace. First of all, I'd like to welcome Michael and Annette for joining the Township Committee. Welcome. While we're talking about changes to the agreement with overlay zones, I remember there's a clause 32 in the settlement agreement. The parties acknowledge that each has entered into this agreement on its own volition, without coercion or duress, after consulting with its counsel. That each party is the proper person and possesses the authority. There's a typo. Possesses the authority to sign the agreement, that this agreement contains the entire understanding of the parties, and that there are no representations, warranties, covenants, or undertakings other than those expressly set forth herein. I recall last year that Tara and maybe Diane said that we were told by our attorney we had a gun to the head, we signed it under duress. So while we're talking about the validity of all the clauses, one question that I would have for Mr. Cantor is, if clause 32 wasn't actually satisfied upon the original signing for the execution or authorization of the agreement, is the agreement actually still valid? Something to consider. While I'm on the subject of, well, actually, I'm just going to talk about something different entirely because, I wasn't planning to talk about clause 32 when I came up here. So the police blotter, I had some questions about that, and I do want to thank you for aggregating all of the 2022 police blotters. I'm just curious what the process is for the historical storage of all of these blotters. I noticed on the website right now we show going back to January of 2022. What if residents were curious about earlier years? How would we go about finding those? I did notice that the entire month of June 2022 is still missing from the blotter. I had pointed that out a couple months ago. I would appreciate if you could follow up on that. It also seems there's a gap in the blotter between December 8th and December 24th of last year. Which is strange because we started getting January and then December wasn't actually finalized. I am aware that Assistant BA Molman stated on October 18, 2022, the police department gives a snapshot of what they feel they would like to share with the public, and the KPIs are separate. Many others have stated their concerns about inconsistencies in reporting. So if we were curious about the whole accounting of criminal activity in our town, how do we go about doing that? I know I can submit an Okra. Sometimes I submit an Okra and nothing comes back. So I would like some guidance as to what Okra I should submit to get the hits that I would like to learn about. Thank you. As for environmental contamination at the dump, back in October, I asked about soil borings 21 and 23 at the dump and why they were not tested for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons at the depth of the known historical contamination from the soil unearthed next to underground leaking fuel storage tanks from the early 90s. Could you please inform the public if there has been any additional testing done to ensure that the site is safe for development? If there has been no additional testing done, could each of you explain whether or not you believe that affordable housing should be built atop a piece of land that has not been properly and thoroughly diligenced to the best of the public's comfort level? And please don't deflect by saying, I have 5 seconds, if you could grab me some extra time. And please don't deflect by saying that if it's not going to be built at the DPW due to environmental issues, then it might be built at the train station. That's not an acceptable answer to the question. The question is whether or not you believe the township has conducted proper due diligence on the environmental conditions at the property, given the gaps in testing that I pointed out last year. Thank you.
Hi, Christine Bass, 15 Fairfield Terrace, and ditto for me on the Zoom. I don't need to talk too much about that, it's pretty obvious. Okay, I'm gonna go fast, so I hope we can follow because I only got 3 minutes. Millburn Township agencies and governance have failed to set safety standards and pose sufficient guidelines to protect the public, particularly children and electromagnetically sensitive who are more vulnerable to the effects of EMF. I'm one of those people. Actions speak louder than words. With over 6 months of warning from me and about public safety issues and studies and information, the Millburn Township Mayor Committee and Environmental Commission, which I'd like to include in this, continues to roll out their 5G cellular technology with zero transparency to questions presented to this committee and to their plan or haphazard throw-up of this technology. They continue to not only install this tech, but to not provide warning signs to township residents. What I found particularly disturbing at the Millburn Environmental Commission meetings was they were not presented with any of the information that I presented with everybody on this township committee. They knew nothing of it. And I was asked to go and to actually work with this committee, and no one even appointed me to be on it. And they work on dog poop bags primarily. I'm sorry, but it's really sad. I mean, they're really nice people, but it's fluff and stuff. It is literally like virtue signaling of environmental like bottle caps. So we need to focus on serious environmental issues. Like, why are they not tasked with the dump site, for example? So I just quickly, between 1995 and 2020, there are 417,000 cell antenna sites. By 2023, there'll be an additional 800,000 cell antenna sites in the United States, and that does not include the small technology every 150 feet that has been proposed on Residential Street and is being rolled out in certain communities across the country. And we also have some of it a little bit here. So I'm going to go through, if you allow me the time, to go through 10 bullet points at the end. If you don't, I understand the health risks and the science. I have a bunch of safety and health resources in this document, which I'll send you tomorrow. But what I'd like to talk about is what your consultant's working on, who I'd love to have his name. I know you told it to me once before, but I'd love to get it in writing. I'd like to talk about the 5G resolutions and objectives that should be implemented by Millburn Township. Here's some thoughts that I have, and maybe you could jot these down. Hiring of multiple independent scientists, epidemiologists, MDs, environmental medicine specialists with skills in EMF and EMF toxicology without conflicts of interest in the industry, such as the consultant that it appears that you have hired. I'm not 100% sure about that. Immediate moratorium on all installations and approvals pending a finalized safety resolution and review with township residents. Setup of a 5G committee with appointments, obviously traditional appointments, as well as willing volunteers to be able to participate, such as myself. Medical informed consent needs to be given to all township residents that they're being exposed to EMF frequencies. Prioritization of the Township Environmental Committee's focus to be 80% on the 5G topic. Need a redlining of the entire town showing all proposed cell installation and measurements to households, including disclosure of radiation levels to those households. No cell towers, either small or large scale, to be placed within safe distance of schools, libraries, churches, office buildings, hotels, high density housing, police stations, township offices, fire departments, library, town centers that are within high density population and workers and natural habitats, such as the South Mountain Reservation.
Ms. Best, you're out of time.
Okay, well,
You'd
then
send
I will
that to us.
send you the
Thank
entire
you.
thing. Thank you so much.
Jean Pasternak, 342 Hobart Avenue. First, I would like to follow up on the idea of using Nixle or an equivalent system to alert residents about crimes that are underway. I know, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was an incident just a block away from my home. Many police cars, several policemen chasing assailants, and I found out about it probably days later, I'm not sure, but it's very disconcerting. It would be really helpful for us to know that information more real time. Other towns do it, I don't understand why we don't. The second point I want to ask and follow up to my previous question is about Mr. Buzak. I listened to the hearing, the case management hearing last Friday. I would say not only did he cost us in terms of having now to re-educate another attorney by having him removed, he cost us goodwill with the court system. And Judge Santamara's tone, I think, really reflected that in the case management. I'd like to just give you some highlights of some of the things that she said that really weren't reported. Thank you. I know you did your best, but I did take some notes. First of all, you didn't seem to mention her consternation about the lack of contact with Attorney Carroll representing Woodmont. As a result of that and dragging the heels by Milburn this past year plus, she was not inclined to give any more time to the township. Attorney Cantor replied, I think we can resolve the FSHC motion. I propose we try to meet with Woodmont as soon as we have with FSHC. Mr. Cantor agreed that those issues need to be addressed with Woodmont prior to the compliance hearing. The judge said it has been taking an inordinate amount of time. Milburn keeps rescheduling and rescheduling. She asked why simultaneously you can't talk to Carroll, and Carroll said he had been trying with no success to reach Milburn. After all these many months, we still don't know what Milburn's position is. I don't want to see a lot of progress. I want to see a resolution. That's a quote by her. Good or bad, compliance or not, if you don't agree, that's okay. That's my job. So that was an interesting statement, I think, on the judge's part. Bauer said the critical piece for him is the RPM. He envisions them with the tax credits. There were times to get those in June, September, and another decision in December. We just got results for the cycle, he said. The new source of funding, once in a lifetime, that the governor has put forward is a big chunk of money. It's not like tax credits. It's something happening one time. Let's make sure that this development is positioned to apply for this first thing immediately. It's why we are pushing it now. We're willing to give it that extra time to be able to get that money. Interesting. So I guess my question really is, what are we doing about the, I don't know how you would phrase it. I don't know what malpractice really means, but the fact that the goodwill of the court and the judge seems to have been squandered, as well as the fact that we have to re-educate a new attorney. What are we doing in terms of following up with the Buzak situation? Thank you.
Richard Cyber, 27 Southern Slope Drive. If it's not yours, don't take it. If it's not true, don't say it. If it's not right, don't do it. Over 80% of the recall signs throughout the town have been stolen. We have thieves living here among us. There's a $1,000 reward for the identification and prosecution of these thieves. It's time for the thieves to turn themselves in and reveal who instructed and hired them. The Nest and Ring videos throughout the town have captured the vehicles and the drivers. They will soon be released for all to view. Again, the thieves have a short leash to turn themselves in. Welcome to the town committee, Michael and Annette. And thank you, Tara, for serving this community.
Yes, Tara.
That's it.
Good evening, Linda Bloniaris.
Good evening.
Mountain View Road. So I'm just gonna add to the Zoom call because I normally don't come to these meetings. I have a long day, and it's really important to hear what's going on. Do we have a communication manager or director in the town? Like, who runs the communications here? Because this is, for a town like Millburn, this is mind-boggling that there's less than 30 people here, 20 people. I ran communications for a very large insurance company for 15 years. And I think, especially with the amount of change going on right now, like having a really tight communication strategy to really engage the community is important. The Zoom is only one piece of that. Maggie, I know you do your weekly calls and they're very positive and uplifting, and but there's a lot of other stuff going on. And when I worked for MetLife, for the CEO, not directly, but we went out of our way to hold town hall meetings and really engage employees, financial advisors, especially when change was happening that wasn't necessarily perceived as good. You know, we had compensation changes, lots of layoffs and reorgs constantly. So, having a really good way to engage the public and really get more participation. I come here and it's the same people. I don't know everybody. I know a few people. I know names. And I get all my information from social media, which is horrible. It is really not the way to be engaging people like me, because I'm very busy. Maggie knows I'm dealing with a 100-year-old mother right now. So I'm like trying to follow the bouncing ball to what's going on here. I rely on my neighbors. I don't know some of these people, but I do now, face to face. And I'm getting all these little sound bites and trying to piece the story together. So communication is my thing. So I would ask the township to really think about doing more.
Thank you, Linda. I will now close the public comment period. This time, our professional and committee members may directly answer any questions made by the public. Mr. Benaik, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I have
Answer?
a few items,
Sure.
Mayor, that I'd like to cover.
Sure.
First and foremost is communication that we just heard as well. I also believe that we need to communicate as much as possible and have as many seminars or progress what we are doing on this fair share housing to communicate to the residents. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If it's a bad news, we get it, we feel bad about it, but they should know right away. So having a conversation and having that communication session is a must and a good thing to do. There are a few things that were asked here or made this statement about, and my understanding on those things, and I'm going to say it here, there was a comment made about school budget and the 75 unit and the people or kids that will go to school. Approximately it's about $20,000 or $22,000, whatever that cost per student is. That is not cost per student. The budget for the school is about 100 million. There are about 5,000 students, so cost per student is $20,000. If the student population comes down to 4,500 and the budget is 100,000, then that becomes $22,000. So it's not that you're paying per student, it is a total budget divided by the number of students, and that is where the number go back and forth. Yes, it will increase if you get more taxes and if you get more development, that number will increase, budget will increase, but it will also, if the student increase more, the total number per student will go down. Again, this is my thought process, this is my analysis. I just wanted to bring it here to mention that as well. There was a question about how much of an outlay for 75 unit separate site is. I think it was discussed in the past. I'm going to again say it, and it has changed, I don't know. But from the township itself, it was between $3 and $5 million layout. Everything else was going to be covered either with a rebate, tax rebate, or whatever those things were. It was about $3 to $5 million. It could be a little more now with pandemic. It could be a little less. Again, I don't know, but this was discussed right up in the beginning, and I remember discussing this. Then there was also a question about DPW moving, where the part of the DPW will move. And the site that we're talking about is 2 acres out of 4.5 acres DPW site. And in those 2 acres, there's a parking lot. More than half that site is parking lot right now, where there's parking right up front at the entrance. And then there's a solar dome, and there are a couple more things in there. The building still stays. So the solar dome, and there were a couple more things along with the parking for those trucks that were parked on that site that is being used for this site, was going to be moved to JFK site, where we have leaf compost site right now. Not all township has leaf compost in their own towns, but we have it here. The discussion a couple years ago was to actually have a cell tower on the side, DPW, whatever moves from here in that side. And then on the other side, the left side, was going to be a field. Total cost on that, including the field, was about 1.6 or $1.7 million. But that plan got postponed with this DPW up in, we did not talk about this for a very long time in fair share housing. But that part of DPW was a few $100,000 or maybe a couple $100,000 for moving the solar dome and making the parking lot there. But that is what my information is from the time that we had discussed this. Now, I had actually voted, and we all sat here and voted to go back and renegotiate. And we were all talking about Mr. Buzak needs to be terminated from here. Even though I was not in favor of making that change, I voted yes. And they went in to renegotiate. And then this is what we heard today. Whatever the news is, good or bad, it's out there, it's here. I don't like what is being held in the town, but this is again not a township thing. It is a state mandate that we have not followed, and that's why affordable housing is behind us. Again, this is whatever I'm saying is based on what my analysis or my understanding on the whole project is. Then there was also a conversation made about it's a contaminated site. Now, we sit here as a board of directors. We don't run the township on day to day. We don't understand if that is contaminated or not, including the resident too. So I'm hoping the professionals here and the people who are forcing us to make the site there are asking for enough tests. And we are doing all those tests and passing or failing that site. Now, if that site gets failed on the contamination, I agree. What is the next step? What do we need to do next? Is this site going to move somewhere else? Or whatever that is, I am 100% confident, I am confident that we as a township official, including the salaried employees, are doing whatever is needed for that site, including to, may I please finish?
Why? Excuse me. Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So again, coming back to, I am hoping every test is done, and if the site is okay to be built, it gets built then. It doesn't get built if it is contaminated, and fair share housing, whether they ask us to make it someplace else, that is also, again, for them to tell us where to build it then. We have reached out to them so many times, and this is what they keep telling us. So that is, again, my understanding on the contamination as well. Environmental Commission, there was another comment made. Well, you have to apply for a volunteer interest form, and that's how you get picked up for whatever volunteer thing you apply for. And whether Environmental Commission discussed one thing or the other, I wouldn't belittle that. They are doing their volunteer work. We get enough belittled here, that's fine, but people who are already volunteering, if that makes sense to them, they're discussing those things. it's sad to actually see. Yes, there are always better things to discuss. There's always process improvement from everyone. Well, fill it up, fill the interest form up, and get on the board, and then decide. There are not just one person or 2% discussing it. There are more than that. So it's a collective effort. I'm sure what you're talking about today will get discussed tomorrow, if not day after. Whatever that is, it is a collective volunteer group that are discussing these things. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. Excuse me. Ms. Prupus,
I do. Can I use the restroom before I go? I didn't want to miss anything anybody said.
we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna start back up again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Pardon me, Ms. Prupus?
So I
Thank
have
you.
a long list of questions. The first thing I want to acknowledge the request to go back to Zoom, which I firmly believe in. I'd like to make a motion to the TC that we reinstate Zoom for our land use boards. I'm just gonna put it out there, looking for a second. One more time. Looking for a second to reinstate the Zoom options for our land use boards, which there's still Zoom on the Environmental Commission. Alex, I sent you an email, I asked you that, like, what the other HPC still on Zoom?
No.
Is Rec Commission on Zoom?
No.
So just the Environmental Commission's on Zoom?
I don't know.
I assume so.
They were on last.
I'm meeting with the head of the rec department tomorrow. I can tell you that at the next meeting.
There was a
tell
Rec Commission. You mean the Environmental?
I meant environmental, pardon me.
I
I'm
can tell
meeting-
you because I was on their call last week.
Well, I know
Excuse me.
I know the
Excuse
Environmental
me.
Commission's on Zoom, so I, Alex, I sent you that email, I was hoping to get some more information, which I didn't. But it doesn't look like any of my colleagues up here want to reinstate the Zoom, so I will let that motion fly and move on. So I'm just gonna go down my list of questions. So one thing that I don't understand that has been asked about the 75 unit on top of the RDP. So I'm just gonna, I don't know if Jared, you weren't part of the negotiation, so I'm gonna ask Alex. Can you just explain to me how the 75 unit came about on top of the RDP?
I thought that we were, look, this is, I thought we were swapping to.
That was a question that was directly asked, Alex, and if you can't do it, that's cool.
I do not have the answer to that question.
Can you get the answer to that question to me?
The only thing I can speculate is that the township has an obligation or a number of 1,300 units, and perhaps that it was surmised that those 75 units are working toward.
Okay, so I'm still super unclear about the RDP versus how, because that's the realistic development potential. Thank you. And Maggie, maybe you can answer this, so because you were in all those negotiations, and it's just one of those things that, like, let's put it to rest. And clarification for myself. So the RDP, like, that's what the town went with the vacant land use adjustment in our plan and came up with a number. That's what we were required to build. Where did the 75 unit come from on top of that? Wait,
I think I just answered it. It's that the township has a 1,300 unit deficit.
but how did they agree to the RDP? Why wasn't the RDP higher? Like, there came to, somebody said the RDP, this is your number, right? Who said this is your number? Who said your RDP is 114? Fair share?
Fair share.
So why didn't they make it bigger? Where did the 75 come from? And it's cool, like, I can move on, but I need to know, and maybe Mr. Cantor can explain this to me.
We can explain it later.
Yeah, later, for sure. Maybe you can have some conversations with some people who were in the negotiations so I can understand this better. So that would be very much appreciated. And as Sanjeev said, that we're not relocating the dump building. So people keep asking, where is the DPW going? And that building's not going anywhere. Alex, I hope this is okay about the gas situation. Are we allowed to speak about how we might be handling the gas pumps?
I think it did explain that, but we are above ground.
Microphone, please.
It's on.
Yeah.
No, we don't hear.
The township is going to be installing above ground tanks for the use of in particular, the fire department. However, most of our other vehicles, we are looking into a relationship with Wawa to be able to fuel through Wawa.
Great. And so then we're just left with the salt dome, and the trucks are gonna go to other parking lots, so we don't have to like build a parking lot for trucks. So we're just looking at the salt dome at this point.
And
in
the
term-
convenience center,
And the what?
the convenience center where people can drop off stuff.
Right, like the
Recycling.
recycling and all that. So those are the, because I think everyone's like, where are we moving it all? So it's those two pieces that have to be moved, and we're probably gonna look back up to the JFK,
Correct.
right? And so are you working on that like actively in terms of getting that done?
Well, at this point, tonight was the first time that we brought to the public that we've known after this brief, discussion with Fair Share Housing, that 75 units are not negotiable, and that we're moving forward. And now there are a bunch of things that we need to start in earnest,
And that being one of them.
of course.
Okay, got it. Just so everybody knows, Mr. Cantor takes direction from the consensus of the TC, and that might have been like a facetious question in jest, but 3 people agreeing to give direction to Mr. Cantor on behalf of all the residents of the town. We have a public information officer who, it's a full-time job, correct?
Correct.
Who does all the communications, and there is a lot of information that's going to be coming out about the affordable housing, the 100%, and all the other building going on. So I think that we can ramp that up with our public information officer, especially since we don't have Zoom. Can we, at this point, clarify what the adjustment to the overlays are? Can that be public knowledge? Is there a reason that can't be public knowledge at this point?
You may?
It was a confidential settlement transmission. It would be inappropriate for us to disclose it in public, given that it was given to us as a confidential proposal from Fair Share Housing. It would violate our agreement with Fair Share Housing to negotiate with them.
But we were giving the alternate overlays.
So I'm saying we're involved in litigation.
Because it's
We're involved in litigation. They're confidential settlement transmission from Fair Share Housing. It would be inappropriate to disclose it. However, once it's disclosable, I presume in transparency, it's disclosed to the public. That's how litigations go. So there is reasons not to disclose it.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Annie says, that's been submitted to the planning board?
Yes, it's been submitted to the planning board and is currently under review by the zoning officer, from my understanding.
Is it,
No, it's not in front of the planning.
It's not in front of the.
no, but it's been submitted. It will be in front of the planning board.
At some point.
Do we
Depending
have
on-
any kind
I
of
mean-
timeline?
I do not, because there are certainly probably things that they're gonna have to go back and, revise. It's not been deemed complete.
So but at some point, it will be on the agenda of the planning board.
Yes, it will be.
And perhaps, because we have our meeting the night before the planning board, our representatives from the TC will share that when it is coming, so people can know that the next night they want to show up to the planning board. And crossing them off. The historical blotter, is that able, Alex, can you look into that in terms of making it easily accessible?
So there's a
On the-
police blotter that we have the history from 21 and 22 at this point. What's there are the documents that were produced.
Okay, so we're building that.
Yeah.
That archive will
And
be-
those are the documents that have been produced for the police blotter.
Okay.
And they're also sent to all the publications, Tap Into, Patch, and they are posted on the township's website.
Okay. Nick Solt, we did talk about this last year, and I know that you were gonna maybe talk to the police chief about it and there's no interest, right? That's,
Well, it's not, I think we're, confusing. One, there's, it's not that there's no interest, it's just that we already
we already communicate. What I think Ms. Pasternak is speaking of is also there are neighborhood group chats, there are Ring camera groups, there are neighbors next door, all kinds of social media that disseminate information about things that are going on. In particular, I understand there was an example of Westfield knew about something before our residents did. Unfortunately, that was some, Ring, or neighbors,
Yeah, I get
discussion
those,
in Westfield. That was not the Westfield Police Department putting out information about what's happening in Milburn. I will say that it is important that we communicate things as quickly as we possibly can. And in particular, if there is a point where the police department feels that the public is in danger, we have the tools and the ability to communicate that to the public.
Great. We hired the 5G consultant, or we didn't hire?
We did hire.
We did hire, and
And they're currently working on a 5G ordinance and a 4G ordinance. And just to clarify further on Ms. Best's points, I think it's important to understand that we do not control, as a municipality, the regulation of, and I feel like we've said this before, but we do not control the regulation of this technology. That is done by the FCC. We passed an ordinance, I believe it was in 2017, or 18, to protect ourselves to the extent that we have control over some items in our right of way, but we do not have the ability to deny application when it comes to these types of technologies. And so that's really the crux of that issue. And we are working on having some additional ordinances written to further that protection, in particular under streets and sidewalks of the township's general code, as well as some other information that Mr. Lupo is getting for us from Hoplite. They are, one of the things that we've asked him to work on is a map of the current locations of our cell sites, as well as the latest safety information that's been provided to the FCC on behalf of those cellular carriers. So that is all in process.
So we're gonna get those ordinances back. At some point, he will come and present to the township committee. Okay, my request is during that presentation, if we can give the public like 15 or 10 minutes to ask questions of him when he's here. So that's my request, so that our residents can ask any questions that they may have. The question to why we ratify the appointments now of those three boards, maybe Mr. Marizini, you can answer that question.
I was not involved in that discussion.
I wasn't involved in that. Oh, yes, Christine,
I
also.
had let you all know that there were some errors in terms, and the SID ordinance, obviously somebody dropped out. So it was really just confirming what was already done at the reorg. It was just correcting some of the errors.
Great.
Nothing new. We looked at both.
South Mountain and the speeding. Oh, so I know in this room, there's been subcommittees and people looking and talking about how to deal with that. Is it something that we can just give more extra attention to, even beyond what we're already giving extra attention to on some of those cross streets in South Mountain? Alex?
Yeah, I'll speak to the police chief. Generally what they do is they will surveil an area to ensure that there is speeding and that they're not, dedicating resources to an area that's not impacted at this point. So, certainly that's an easy first step to make sure that certain streets and certain areas are being impacted by speeding. So we'll have a discussion with the police chief.
I know that there were talks of speed humps going in. Did that ever have any movement, or is that being worked on? So that is in.
There were two installed on Ridgewood Road.
So is that a possibility of more of those?
I mean, I think, again, we've allocated a process for that. I mean, of how people can go about requesting those. Because speed humps
there are certain rules under the MUTCD that need to be followed to install speed humps, as well as their impact to emergency service vehicles, as well as plows, as well as the community itself and whether they want them or not. But I think, as we've said in previous discussions like this, we look to obviously educate is important. Tell people not to speed. Most of the people, or I don't want to generalize, but there are probably some of those that are speeding that are residents and neighbors. And so first point would be to educate and make sure, we are taking steps in our own lives to make good decisions behind the wheel, as well as then enforcement, then engineering. Once you've gone through those steps and you cannot, eradicate a speeding problem, then you look to do engineering, install speed humps, narrow lanes, whatever, normalize intersections, things that have all been talked about in that area. But I think it's the last step.
Great, so we're educating and then we're enforcing, and so hopefully that will maybe take care of the problem there. And then the last thing I just want to address is the environmental testing at the DPW site. So because we had we had a big conversation last fall about this as well. Did you, and it was kind of, I'm assuming that you went back to the people that did the test, brought it to their attention, whatever needed to get cleared up, got cleared up? I mean,
They did what they did in their professional opinion, what was necessary on that site at this time, based on what we asked them to do. It's been submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency, the DEP, NJDEP. Once we start going through this process of 75 units, and the site is, there's due diligence done by our RPM or whoever is developing that site, then additional information, that report that's been sent down to the DEP, determination of what's done with that site, that will all start to come to fruition.
Okay,
Right
does
now,
that happen in the beginning, or do you have any
Yeah,
idea
I'm
when
assuming
that
that they're gonna wanna
happens?
do their due diligence before they start doing a lot of work on that site.
Great, and then in meeting with Fair Share and Mr. Cantor, I'm sure that you can, they were fine with the site. They have no problems with the site or the environmental, that they're happy with that site, they want that site. That was my understanding.
Yes.
And they feel like it's safe, they don't have a concern about the environment.
Committee, when they said several times, they don't have any issues with the environmental on that site.
So at this point, it's gonna be up to the EPA and the DEP or whatever agency and RPM to keep looking to see if it's a safe site to build on.
And make the determination of whether, the recommendations that were made in that report are the way to proceed with the site.
Okay, great. All right, thank you guys for your patience and
Thank you,
for
Ms.
answering all
Pucas.
the questions.
Mr. Cullen,
Okay.
you're fine. Ms. Romano? Good, thank you. You're good. Mr. Marizzi?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few things. I might need more than 3 minutes.
You may get that. Keep it loud.
So one of the questions has to do with who's an employee of the township. I believe that this is an issue having to do with Committeewoman Romano's service as a member of the Local Assistance Board. And the answer is that even elected officials are considered by the IRS to be employees of the municipality. But that does not affect the role that Committeewoman Romano has on the Local Assistance Board, because that statute talks about employees of the board, not employees of the municipality. Another question that came up procedurally is with respect to the rules of procedure, which my understanding were adopted at the reorganization meeting with a whole list of.
We're not.
They were not.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
We're not.
But they're also not, they do not expire.
They do, resolutions expire at the end of the year, not an ordinance.
The resolution will continue in operation until there's an amended. Then with respect to the questions about the affordable housing project, the 75-unit project, I have a few things to talk about there. First, the question about my role with RPM. Yes, I did a number of years ago represent RPM in a limited project in another community. I thoroughly researched the issue having to do with the rules of professional conduct, procedure, responsibility, and the case law under all of that, and am satisfied that I do not have a conflict that would require me to withdraw from representing the municipality here because of the rules that are set forth in the rule book adopted by the Supreme Court of New Jersey and the case law interpreted by the courts thereunder. With respect to the negotiation of the redevelopment agreement, now will probably be with RPM. That will begin in earnest now that the answer has come from Fair Share that the 75-unit project is not going to be changed to another project in another location. So we're going to be getting into those negotiations in earnest. And a part of that process will be the negotiation of a payment in lieu of taxes, which is available under various statutes. And one of them that will no doubt apply here is the redevelopment statute, which provides for the payment in lieu of taxes, as was mentioned, to encourage development in places that are not considered to be desirable places. Now, that doesn't apply to the township of Millburn. It applies, in this case, to a particular location in Millburn. And that location is larger than the DPW site, is larger than the site on which the proposed 75-unit project will be developed. It includes areas around this building. This area was declared to be an area in need of redevelopment a number of years ago. However, a redevelopment plan was not adopted at that time. One was proposed, but it was not adopted. So the provision of payments in lieu of taxes is something that can be provided in a redevelopment area. We will be negotiating those numbers, and the township has a financial advisor who will be assisting in that process. The other point that has come up that I feel I should mention has to do with the environmental condition of that site. I have been practicing in the field of environmental law for over 50 years. We and our firm, and I in particular, represent redevelopment projects in many communities in the state. And in almost all of them, there's redevelopment on sites that were once contaminated. That's called either brownfield redevelopment or even Superfund redevelopment. It's not uncommon that a site that is proposed for redevelopment is contaminated. Part of the redevelopment process, and one of the key features of redevelopment, is the cleanup of the site. So the site upon which a redevelopment project, whether it's retail, commercial, or residential, will be built, must meet appropriate Department of Environmental standards. Those standards are established based upon the use and the intended use of the project. For residential, it's the most strict. The township has a licensed site remediation professional, an LSRP, who under a program that was established several years ago by the Department of Environmental Protection, is in fact the Department of Environmental Protection under the guidance of the department, but has the authority to act as DEP. The LSRP program is one that is licensed, that is strictly enforced and regulated, and the ultimate decision about the appropriate level of remediation at that site will be made before it can be used for a residential site. No one is proposing, to my knowledge, that the site be used without further remediation. That remediation will be defined and decided upon. As Mr. McDonald mentioned, there will, as part of the arrangement with RPM, be an opportunity in addition to the work that the township has done for RPM to undertake due diligence on the site with respect to environmental and geophysical conditions, and there will be a lot more information typically that will be provided there. So having represented communities from Hoboken to Perth Amboy to Carneys Point, all of which have involved contamination, it's not unusual to develop a residential site on a once, I have emphasized the word, contaminated site. It will be cleaned up. That's a key feature of the process. I guess the last issue I should address is why I'm sitting next to the mayor and next to Committeeman Cohen. And I've been practicing municipal law since 1965. It's very typical that that's the way it's set up. It's not universal. I've seen it done both ways. But ever since I started practicing law a long time ago, it's been typical for the administrator or the clerk and the attorney to sit on the dais. Not intended to be bullying. I've never been accused by anybody of being a bully, and that's not why I'm sitting here. I think I've covered the issues that were on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mazzio.
Very good. Mr. McDonald, do you have anything to share?
I just want to clarify one thing, and I think it was Mr. Feld who had brought up regarding the PATF 2 fund. That fund is a public assistance fund run through the state. Those are individuals in our community who are in need, and usually these disbursements include payments for utilities or some other thing as vetted by the township social worker. And certainly there's no backup because that would indicate who they are.
So, don't have anything about the other trust fund page.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. McDonald?
No.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Consent agenda resolutions. The Township Committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to any items listed on the consent agenda? I would also like to advise there was a revision to Resolution 23-044 regarding the appointments to the Milburn Short Hills Business Association, Inc. District Management Corporation Board of Trustees. Yal Klatt, owner trustee, will no longer be an owner and eligible to serve in this position, so his name has been removed from the resolution. Any questions? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 23-039 through Resolution 22-048 and revised, which are listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Brutus?
Yes.
Mr. Romano?
Yes.
Mr. Benayak?
Yes.
Mayor Mittens?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2629-23. Mr. Benayak, you are scheduled to sponsor this, sir.
Sorry.
You're scheduled to sponsor 2629-23.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2629-23, bond ordinance to authorize the acquisition of a new ladder fire truck, including original apparatus and equipment in, by, and for the Township of Milburn in the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, to appropriate the sum of $1.5 million to pay the cost thereof, to make a down payment, to authorize the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, and to provide for the issuance of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of such bonds. Mr. McDonald, do you want to?
Sure. So the Township of Milburn is purchasing a ladder truck for the fire department. This replacement has been accelerated by about 2 years due to the current condition of our ladder truck and the amount of time it will take to build the ladder truck. This ordinance is authorizing $825,000 to come out of reserve that we have been putting money away in to make sure that we could, purchase this truck. We have already allocated about $425,000 in capital ordinances for the truck. So this ordinance is essentially authorizing $675,000 in bond anticipation notes that are, that is new debt. Again, this is about a $1.8 million purchase. Timing is of the essence because the price is being held right now, and if we don't look to authorize the purchase, then that price will go up to over $2 million.
And its lead time is about 2 to 3 years.
Yes, it's a very long time.
Right, so we may not be, again, we don't know the payment structure yet, but we may not be paying the whole money upfront.
No, we'll be authorizing the entire amount, but yes, the $675,000 that's being authorized, that won't actually be issued as debt until.
We have to make that payment.
Correct.
Again, all these, or not all this particular bond that we are talking about, we're not going out and taking money or taking the liability, $675,000 right now. We are just authorizing the expense. And whenever we need that money to be paid, that's the time when township go out and do the bond or note, whatever they need to do, right? Thank you. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Ladies and gentlemen?
Okay, I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, February 7th, 2023.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Krupas?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes. Thank you. I'm scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2630-23, an ordinance granting renewal of municipal consent to Comcast of New Jersey LLC to construct, connect, operate, and maintain a cable television and communication systems in the Township of Milburn, Essex County, New Jersey. You want to take this one, Mr. McDonald? Your mic.
This is our renewal of our franchise agreement. As some of the committee members may recall, and the public may recall, we had presented this last year, and on September 20th, had a public hearing regarding the renewal agreement. This codifies and the renewal agreement. The next step in this is that we are going to, once introduction takes place, we will be sending it to the BPU for their review, and then it will come back to the Township Committee in March for public hearing and adoption. So if there are any questions on this particular document or any revisions prior to its introduction, now would be the time to do so. Yeah, it spells out the terms of that agreement and allows Comcast to be one of the provider of cable in the township, in addition to FiOS. FiOS has a separate BPU arrangement that allows them to provide their service to the township residents.
Anybody have any questions again about this? I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Krupas?
Yes.
Ms. Romano? Deputy Mayor Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes. Okay. No old business, new business, rules of procedure and business. Anybody have any questions about the rules and procedure and order of business? Okay, we have consensus, Christine, to move forward with that? Thank you. Next agenda. Okay, proposed recreation fee ordinance. Mr. McDonald, do you want to review the recommendation and have the committee discuss, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, this will be coming to the Township Committee in the near future for a revision to the ordinance. Essentially, what happens is that the rec commission, as well as the department, are good about reviewing their fees and establishing new fees every 3 years. And what they do is they set up a range that allows them to operate within, based on the programming type, based on the program offering. And this is an order of business that we do essentially every 3 years to make sure that fees are increasing at the rate that it does cost to put on some of these programs.
Okay, Do we have consensus from the township to move forward with this?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Good. Thank you. The Township Committee will now be entering closed session and anticipates adjourning the meeting immediately following the closed session meeting.
Do we have to stick around, or are you gonna take official action? The way it reads that you're gonna adjourn this regular meeting, the caption says you adjourn the regular meeting and you then go and close the executive session. We have to stick around here. That's what your cap says, authorize closed session after regular meeting. If you don't close, yeah, no, but are you gonna take official action? Do we have to stick? But the question I have is, do we have to stick around? Do you plan to take official action later tonight that we need to be here?
The question is a fair question as to whether it may or may not happen. And if you don't know, then the answer would be, it may happen.
Does it get noticed though? I thought you have to notice whether or not official action is being taken at closed session. That's for special, got it.
So we're all at a risk.
The question is whether it's intended that after the closed session,
Is it?
that you come
No.
back here and take any official action. I don't believe so.
All right, that's
And
what I
if
want,
that's-
representation.
if that's the
Based
case,
on that representation, I
that
think most of us will go
representation
home
can be
tonight.
made
And
and
good night. I
go
mean,
home.
I just had to put this on the record because of the Open Public Meetings Act, to have this clarification.
Good question.